Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us at the SIEW Energy Insights webinar series. Please participate in our poll by scanning the QR code on the screen or go to menti.com and enter the code 4668251. Share your thought with us as we will be discussing the results later during the program. The program will begin shortly. Thank you. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Hayden Lee and your host from the Energy Market Authority of Singapore. Thank you once again for joining us at the SIEW Energy Insights webinar series. Today's webinar, Revolutionising Change for the Grid of the Future, is held in partnership with Clarion Events, organizer of the SIEW partner event, Future of the Grid. Scan the QR code on your screen or visit menti.com and enter the code 4668251 to participate in our polls. To start today's webinar, I would like to welcome Ms. Soumya Rao from PwC for her presentation. Ms. Rao, please.
Thank you, Hayden. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm delighted to welcome you all this afternoon to the webinar and panel discussion on revolutionizing change for the grid of the future. We have a distinguished panel of experts with us today, but before we get into the panel discussion, let me walk you through a paper that we published about ASEAN's readiness for energy transition. By way of introduction, my name is Soumya Rao, and I work with PwC in Singapore with a focus on the infrastructure sector. Our infrastructure team globally comprises of 1,000 plus professional staff who basically work with clients, either government or private sector, to solve their commercial financial issues in the infrastructure sector, be it greenfield or brownfield assets. In the recent past, I've been doing increasingly more work in the power and utility space in the region, more on the renewable energy side as well. Let me start my presentation with this. Can we go to the first slide, please? Thank you. ASEAN is one of the fastest developing regions around the world, a home to more than 650 million people. This number is expected to continue growing rapidly, with estimated population reaching around 723 million by 2030, behind economies like China and India. Economically, although the ASEAN region has seen a sharp contraction from the pandemic, the region is expected to bounce back quickly to its GDP. And the region is expected to continue growing rapidly to become the fourth largest global economy, exceeding EU and Japan. Over the next decade, ASEAN is expected to undergo further urbanization as well as industrialization, with more than $2 trillion of infra investment expected in the region, and total energy demand to meet this is expected to skyrocket, growing up to 60% increase in overall energy demand by 2040. On the back of increasing industrial activities, growing population, and rising income levels. Moving on. As such, this places a huge pressure on the ASEAN energy sector as energy reserves continue to deplete in the region. ASEAN remains currently a net importer of energy. The region continues to import more than 40% of its total energy supply. Even countries like Indonesia, who are currently net exporter of energy, this is likely to change within the next few decades. With the mismatch in demand and supply, we observe a growing concern on the energy security within ASEAN, with the depleting energy reserves. Moreover, the region also sees the need for a diversification of its energy supply to expand the system to cater to the growing demand. And with this, renewable energy is expected to be one of the key solutions to the growing demand. We observe an increasing trend in renewable energy capacity in the region in the recent past. In the last 2 decades, the compounded annual growth was as high as 7%. This is driven by the region's sustainability agenda, as well as pressures on phasing out fossil fuels within the region. Expansion of the renewable energy capacity was also supported, of course, by the declining cost of renewables, such as solar PV, onshore wind, which has only helped support the business case even more. Next slide, please. The region as a whole saw more than 27 billion that was invested in renewable power sector in the 6 major Southeast Asian markets between 2006 and 2016. Region-wide initiatives have also been established to facilitate the energy transition in the region. At the heart of this energy transition in ASEAN, we have the ASEAN Plan of Action of Energy Cooperation Phase 2. The roadmap highlights 7 key strategies and areas of focus, which also includes the ASEAN power grid, coal and clean coal technology, energy efficiency, conservation, renewable energy, and regional energy policy and planning. This plan takes into account the impacts of COVID pandemic and its recovery plans to establish more ambitious targets to enhance energy security and sustainability within the region. This includes achieving 23% and 35% of renewable energy and total energy supply and installed capacity by 2025. One of the key achievements under phase 1 includes the first multilateral power trading, which was successfully initiated under the Laos, Thailand, Malaysia, Singapore Power Integration Plan for ASEAN Power Grid. And this initiative is also meant to facilitate integration of renewable energy into the power system, as well as sharing of renewable resources across countries in the region. Next slide, please. In our report, we have identified 6 key matrices. While I'm presenting a summary here, we have a lot of detail in the report that you can access offline too. We have identified 6 key matrices to assess the readiness of the ASEAN region in this energy transition. This includes factors such as energy accessibility, reliability, affordability, sustainability, smartness, as well as their participation in energy trading. Starting with accessibility, we considered factors such as electrification rates in member states of ASEAN and development of rural electrification. Secondly, on energy reliability, we look into the peak demand, which is the highest electricity consumption, as well as installed capacity within the region to derive the reserve margins. Thirdly, we look into energy affordability by considering the percentage of average electricity bill in each household compared to the minimum wage in the country. We also look at sustainability based on grid emission factors from the amount of carbon dioxide emissions and electricity generation mix within each country. In energy smartness, we looked at the SP Smart Meter Index, which benchmarks against a total of 85 utilities across 37 countries and markets. Lastly, we also look at the participation of the countries in energy trading by looking at whether there are any existing transmission lines between the countries and capacity on these transmission lines. Next slide, please. Based on analysis, we see that majority of the countries within the region have reached some form of ability to provide for basic energy needs. However, a lot more can be done in terms of deriving its energy from cleaner sources and doing more in energy smartness and participation in the wider ASEAN energy integration process. Next slide, please. Using this information earlier, we have then positioned countries and segmented them into subgroups and mapped the possible future developments with the y-axis showing maturity of basic energy needs and x-axis showing the energy sustainability and smartness of each country. The bubble size kind of represents the GDP of each country. With Myanmar, a lot more has to be done in terms of meeting the basic energy needs. But the other set of countries like Vietnam, Indonesia, Malaysia, Philippines, Cambodia, where the basic energy needs for its people have been largely met, a lot more can be done in making the future energy mix cleaner and smarter and integration with the region. In Thailand and Singapore in particular, more can be done in making the energy smarter and cleaner as these countries also increasingly undertake more renewable energy projects, as well as this penetration of electric vehicles and distributed solar generation, which is expected in the near future as well. Next slide, please. In this report structure, we've kind of focused on key areas for the energy transition. And we will provide an overview of the ASEAN energy sector as covered earlier, followed by discussing the future of energy becoming affordable, cleaner, smarter, and more united. Within each of these kind of 4 topics, we also discuss an overview of the current status, where we include some case studies and key findings surrounding the current status and future targets, and what countries can take for the transition to meet the targets. Next slide, please. Firstly, ASEAN has achieved significant progress in the electrification of the region. Between 2000 and year 2016, more than 170 million people have gained access to electricity. Countries have established very ambitious rural electrification targets, And most ASEAN countries are expected to achieve universal electrification in the next few years. Electrification in ASEAN is in line with the goal 7.1 of UNSGD, which aims to achieve universal access to affordable, reliable, and modern energy service by 2030. Besides providing universal access to energy, having affordable energy is crucial in the pursuit of sustainability goals for the region. To assess the affordability of energy within ASEAN, we took into account several factors, including the average monthly electricity consumption within each country, average electricity tariffs, and looked at the proportion of cost of electricity in household earning minimum wages. Also considered that for some countries there are electricity subsidies, and took that into account when looking at affordability. Next slide, please. Secondly, the future energy sector will become cleaner. We've identified these key trends in the energy transition within ASEAN, which includes phasing out coal, utility scale solar, onshore offshore wind, biomass, electric vehicles, distributed energy generation, energy storage, and also hydrogen. For each trend, we identify the countries who've made some progress in each of these areas, and the details of which is in the report. Firstly, for coal within ASEAN, they are still projected to provide a large share of ASEAN's power due to its cost and availability in the region. Completely phasing out coal would be impractical in the short term and medium term for ensuring energy security in ASEAN due to the growing energy demand. In terms of development in the sector, though, countries such as Philippines have announced a moratorium on new coal-fired power plants. And other countries are also taking active measures in simplifying the structure for renewable energy to promote more renewable energy through regulations. In addition, countries like Singapore have stopped financing coal-fired power plants. Lastly, ASEAN is looking to leverage technologies such as carbon capture, utilization, and storage to reduce the amount of emissions from coal energy generating technologies. On solar, practically most of the member states have established targets. Similarly, onshore, offshore wind and biomass countries that are endowed with rich wind resource, as well as natural resources, have established targets for wind capacity in the country. Next slide, please. We also see the sector becoming more smarter, and this is due to all the digital disruptions that we are seeing in the energy sector in this decade. We're looking at technologies including blockchain, artificial intelligence, IoT, 3D printing for the energy sector. I'll give a few examples here. The blockchain technology, firstly, can be useful in helping us in the reconciliation of energy demand and supply, as well as reducing cost and improving efficiency within energy trading. Blockchain uses the distribution ledger technologies to store and execute smart contracts, allowing for things like peer-to-peer energy trading. This, in the future, will enable households with their own power generation technologies to sell electricity directly to each other through blockchain networks. Similarly, for IoT, it is expected to provide data for on-demand detection and monitoring through the use of sensors. This can help to better provide real-time feedback, which can help to provide better maintenance forecast, bringing about reduced cost, downtime, and man hours. IoT can also help to support the integration of RE by connecting distributed generation sources to smart grids. Similarly, on the construction and asset management side, we could see a lot more application of technology like drones. Next slide, please. Lastly, we see the future energy sector and the future grid within the region to be a united one. Currently, we see more than 5.5 gigawatts of interconnection capacity within the region, with at least 9 cross-border power grids across the region. There was at least 35 terawatt hours of electricity trade within the region in 2019. This existing Asia power grid is expected to expand with more interconnection capacity. Currently, Thailand and Laos account for most of the existing interconnections in the region. The Asean power grid is the key initiative in helping enhance this cross-border electricity trade and unifying the energy sector of the future for the region. As the region is expected to see rapid growth in energy demand, electricity trading is expected to improve energy accessibility, security, affordability, and sustainability within the region. Currently, most of this trade in APG occurs through bilateral agreements, and this is expected to continue growing. This will help bring about more integrated electric market in the region. However, significant challenges exist, including the need to develop market mechanism, achieve standardization of technical standards to drive power trading within the region. Also, more institutional support, financial initiatives may be needed for large-scale projects within this area. In the latest initiatives of ASEAN Power Grid, we've seen the two key projects, the Laos, Thailand, Malaysia, Singapore Power Integration Project, which was announced last week as being successfully commenced, as well as the additional 100 megawatts import of electricity from Malaysia. These two projects will help Singapore also to kind of participate more and prepare more for further moves to connect with the regional power grid, as well as achieve Singapore's sustainability agenda to reduce carbon emissions. As this region is still developing and economic growth is prioritized, fossil fuels will still continue to play a prominent role in the coming years. But with declining costs of renewable energy, policymakers are seeing an opportunity to fulfill their energy accessibility goals while driving the transition to a cleaner and energy efficient future. Subsequently, this transition will require incremental uptake of renewable energy and boost energy security, as well as managing of supply and demand of electricity, boost the smart grids to manage the supply and demand of electricity in the region. The region has stepped up its collaboration efforts with the ASEAN Power Grid Initiative, and the development of interconnected grid systems will further increase the uptake of the energy transition in the region. The transition is happening as we see it. And the question now is, how fast can it be done? And what needs to be done to make this happen faster in Southeast Asia? With this, I come to the end of my presentation, and we'll go deeper into a few of the key questions here as we progress into the panel discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Rao. Let us now take a look at the results of the poll. Question 1 on ranking the following priorities to revolutionize the change for the grid of the future. Most of the audience voted for strategic collaboration between countries. And on to the next question. What is the key challenge faced by the region in achieving a cross-border grid? The audience have selected integrating diverse energy sources as a key challenge. Thank you. As we now begin the discussion, please use the Q&A feature to post your question. Let us know your name and organization, and if your question is directed to a particular speaker. It is my pleasure to now invite Mr. Patrick Avery from G&W Electric Company, Mr. Hansel Kumangbang from Fluence, and Mr. Gabriel Yap from SP Group to join our moderator, Ms. Rao. Over to you, Ms. Rao.
Thank you again, Hidden. And thank you everyone for enthusiastically participating in the Menti quiz. It really gives us insights into what everyone's thinking. This afternoon, I welcome you all back to the panel panel discussion here. We have a distinguished panel of experts here today, and I'm really excited to host this panel. The panelists here, Mr. Patrick Avery, who's dialing in all the way from Chicago, and it's 2 a.m. or 3 a.m. his time. But thank you so much, Patrick, for doing this and sharing your insights from the other side of the world. We also have Hansel Chubangang from Fluence and Mr. Gabriel Yap from SP Power Grid. Before I invite everyone to introduce themselves, just to kind of wrap the presentation there, we've talked about the energy transition, and the energy transition is fully underway around the world, with a major shift from fossil fuels to renewable energy, spurred by breakneck innovation, a tide of capital that's following energy transition, evolving regulation, as well as business models that are rapidly developing. We're all on an everyday basis forging new equations to create value in this space. As companies and investors place decarbonization at the center of their strategy, societal and consumer pressures compel new forms of collaboration. And these forces, as they come together, the forces of policy, investment, technological change, have put us in a place and set the dynamics that we've not seen in the energy sector for a long time. The countries in Asia have also set their own renewable energy targets and already embarked on this journey to deploy large-scale projects for solar, onshore, offshore wind, as well as distributed energy resources. However, the renewable energy resources remain intermittent, and the sun shines when it shines, and the wind blows when it does. So with this energy revolution that's ongoing, let's discuss in this panel how we develop a resilient and flexible grid of the future. To begin with, maybe I'll invite the panelists to briefly introduce themselves and the work that they do and the organizations they work for. May I first invite Gabriel, please?
Hi everyone, fellow industry colleagues and panelists. Very good afternoon to you. I'm Gabriel Yap from SP Power Grid. Currently, I'm heading the section of operational digitalization. The section focuses on automating and harmonizing operations through technology applications for greater operational excellence and improved productivity. During my time in SP, I've had the privilege to gain experience in areas of asset management, operations, and IT implementations. Also, the opportunity to lead several digitalization initiatives projects with key focus in driving productivity, field crew enablement, asset management, and automation. My main interest is in the use and adoption of technology in empowering the workforce in this and for this new digital age. So actually happy to be part of the discussion today.
Thank you, Gabriel. Maybe Hansel, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thank you, Samia. Hello, everyone. My name is Hansel Kubangbang. I'm the Senior Market Applications Officer at Fluence for the Southeast Asia region. And I basically focus on market growth and strategy in the region. I am an electrical engineer by profession, and I've been working with the electric power industry in the Philippines and Southeast Asia for more than 10 years now, with more focus on renewable energy and energy storage integration. Nice to meet you, everyone.
Thank you, Hansel. Patrick, over to you.
Yeah, I'm Patrick Avery. I have over 40 years experience in the power industry, starting my career with Westinghouse Electric Corporation, ABB, Cooper Power Systems, and currently with G&W. My title is Vice President of Power Grid Automation. We do all kinds of customized automation, ranging from automatic transfer schemes to providing turnkey microgrids. G&W has been in business since 1905, and we also manufacture current limiting fuses, cable accessories, sensors, and medium voltage distribution switchgear. Thanks for having me on the panel.
Thank you, Patrick. Yeah, we clearly have experts in the sector here on the call who have deep experience in the energy space. Maybe I'll start off with the first question. With the influx of renewable energy entering the grid, and the influx of renewable energy is inevitable, what do we see as the key challenges to increase the integration of this influx of renewable energy into the grid, as well as what opportunities do we have here to modernize the grid to allow for this integration to be scalable? Can I invite the panelists to share their experience of what they've seen in their markets?
Yeah, probably I can take up this question first. So let's take a look at this from a Singapore's context. So our emissions is expected to peak at 65 metric tons CO2 equivalent by 2030. So Singapore's emission target is to achieve net zero emissions around mid-century. So I think to achieve this, the SG Green Plan 2030 is our national sustainability movement, which focuses on 5 key pillars. So namely city in nature, sustainable living, you're talking about green economy, resilient future, and of course the one that probably we're most interested here is energy reset, right? We have to use cleaner energy and increase our energy efficiency to lower our carbon footprint. So with that, actually, that translates to some 4 key switches, right, from our regulated EMA, which we'll be looking at 4 key switches. I think one switch is the natural gas. So about 95% of Singapore's electricity is generated using natural gas. So I think natural gas will still continue to be the dominant fuel in Singapore in the near future as we scale up the other 3 switches. So I think in this area, the government will help generation companies to improve the efficiencies of their power plants. Now, the next switch we are looking at is regional power grids. So Singapore will also explore ways to tap on regional power grids to access energy that is clean and that is cost competitive. So this could be realized through bilateral cooperations or regional initiatives. So the target is actually to import up to 5 gigawatt of electricity, right? And going down to the third switch is, I think we also have to start looking into emerging low carbon alternatives, where look at low carbon solutions, where the potential to help to reduce Singapore's carbon footprint. I think looking at technologies such as CCUS, you're talking about carbon capture utilization, or storage technologies, hydrogen, and even geothermal energy. So these are clean alternatives that potentially that are emerging. So lastly, but not the least, we're talking about solar. So solar is one of the switch that remains to be Singapore's most promising renewable energy source. I think we are on track to reach our solar goal target of 1.5 gigawatt peak by 2025. Government is working towards achieving a new solar target of at least 2 gigawatt peak by 2030. So the challenge with Singapore is that it's a dense city. So it means that there's limited land spaces for solar deployment. So this is where I feel the opportunity is where innovation comes. So for example, we are actually putting PVs on our rooftops, HDB rooftops. We are having PVs on our reservoirs, right? And of course, with solar power comes intermittency that may cause voltage and frequency issues. So it requires proper system design and adequate leverage to respond to power system constraints. So I think another area of tech we're looking at is probably naturally is energy storage system, ESS, right? This will allow us to address the intermittency issue of solar, and then there's also a target to actually deploy at least 200 megawatts beyond 2025. So I see that as quite an opportunity. So I hope this gives a context of the challenges and opportunities to further our discussions. Yep.
Yeah. So let me go next. Yeah. I believe with increased integration of renewable energy in the grid, naturally it comes with intermittency, net load variability, or increase inter-hour ramp rates. To support clean energy transition, to move to a more sustainable future, I think the grid needs first flexibility. The second is more effective frequency regulation. Battery-based energy storage system have faster ramp rates compared to traditional resources. It can act as a generator and a load depending on the specific need of the grid. So by doing so, it provides additional flexibility to the grid to better manage the challenges brought about by renewable energy. Energy storage has also proven to be the fastest provider of frequency response. Our installation in Ireland shows that with the right policy, with the right support, closer coordination with the grid operators and key stakeholders, and of course, with the continuing development of our team, we have deployed energy storage that can act as fast as 150 milliseconds. So by doing so, energy storage can react and respond faster to frequency variations brought about by intermittency and variability of renewable energy. So in summary, energy storage is a key and integral part of this clean energy transition, particularly in supporting renewable energy integration.
Okay, just to elaborate on what the panelists said, from my standpoint, the power grid for over 100 years has been unidirectional, right? Power only went one way, from the utility to the consumer. So the challenge now with the advent of decentralized power is, can the grid reliably handle bidirectional power flow? So utilities have been pretty prudent in evaluating each interconnection based on the circuit's ability to handle the reverse power flow from decentralized renewable energy. And that continues to be the biggest challenge. A lot of times renewables can't be approved to be installed on the grid because the grid can't handle it. And the utility has to spend, millions, possibly billions of dollars to upgrade their circuits in order to handle it. The benefit, though, to decentralized power is grid resiliency. So from a consumer standpoint, you're not just reliant on the utility anymore for power. So when you have severe storms that happen globally and cause all kinds of problems, most importantly, loss of life, consumers now have a reliable option to have their own power source from a renewable microgrid.
Thank you, everyone. Like Patrick rightly mentioned, utilities are usually focused and have been doing this for hundreds of years. They focused on boosting service reliability and technology capabilities, at the same time controlling cost. We currently are living in a decade of climate action, and there's a need to build more flexibility into the electricity grid, where we can scale up and down supply based on demand, as well as bring more resiliency into the electricity grid. While distributed generation is a part of it, the grid needs to be able to withstand, or if circumstances call for, also rapidly recover from disruptive events. And thirdly, also build a smarter grid to be able to have bidirectional flow of electricity, as well as the other kind of transparency mechanisms that consumers of the future will demand for. As per the NEF 2020 outlook, at least 14 trillion needs to be invested in the grid worldwide by 2050 to really support this, what we talk about, the evolved power system. What technologies would different countries really look at to help with this grid modernization? Can I invite the panelists to give their perspectives on the different technologies and how you've seen it implemented in different countries on smartness, flexibility, and resiliency?
Yep. I think what we look at, we go back to what are the challenges before we look at what are the technologies that can help us with grid modernization. So I think from a decarbonization and sustainability perspective, we'll start to see bidirectional flows in distribution networks, as rightly mentioned by Patrick. And then, of course, the intermittency from renewable sources. We also increasingly see localized capacity demands from EV charging and low carbon electricity imports. And in terms of continuing to be reliable and being resilient, I think the challenges here is the renewal and maintenance of aging assets, demand growth from new developments, interconnections between regional grids. So with all this increasing complexity, right, the role of the future grid has to change, has to evolve. And we're talking about enabling sustainability with low carbon technology, enhanced reliability through a risk-based approach, and the integrated management of electrical systems. So with this roles, it brings us to a few key enablers, right? So digitalization is a must going forward to meet, or rather to optimize grid planning and operations. We should and must leverage on technology to enhance grid capabilities, efficient central management in a very distributed landscape, and of course, last but not least, focusing on the workforce, a competent workforce, right, to enable future roles. So let's take a look at the leveraging on the technology angle. Leveraging on technology angle. I think with all the emission targets that we are after, there will be a large push towards renewable energy. So in Singapore context, I think, for example, solar, as I mentioned, comes with intermittency, causing voltage and frequency issues. So I think to address that, energy storage system will allow us to address this issue. And I think the opportunities are there in terms of technology, right, to start installing ESS. So in fact, I think as Samia, you mentioned in your paper and your presentation that I think EMA has awarded a 200 megawatt ESS project to Sembcorp somewhere in the industrial area in Jurong. So I think this is sort of one area where I feel that these are the opportunities and technology that that can be embarked to help us with grid modernization. On a second aspect is that there's also a push for EV adoption. So we, in a Singapore context, again, we are looking at a target of 60,000 EVs charging points by 2030, and you are expected to have about 600,000 EVs by 2060 when we phase out internal combustion engines. So I think EV are essentially a very small scale mobile ESS, if you see it that way. So which has the potential to enhance grid reliability to cater for demand on the power grid. So how can we harness the power of these little batteries that are running around the island, right? I think that's where I feel, V2G, vehicle to grid, comes in. So I think for a bit of background, I think everybody is aware of EV charging. I mean, a one-way EV charging you're talking about is a kind of dumb charging. It gets a bit smarter when you're able to set time of charge, and then you have this V1G, right? So that's where you have access to energy markets. You start to be able to set charging rates, and then there is this V2G, so which gives us opportunity to essentially tap energy from these little batteries in vehicles that run around the island, right? So of course, depending on the policy setup, you are able to sell the energy back to grid. So I think last year we partnered a V2G technological leader in Europe, TMH, the mobility house, and we started our V2G trial. So this is actually for us to gain operational experience of these systems. So in this trial, we're actually focusing on looking at battery degradation. I think as an owner of EV, or if you're owner of an EV that has a V2G function, actually you would be a natural concern that you buy an EV, your battery could be dead in the first 2 years after the charge and discharge. So this is an important area. And also for our own area of concern, we are looking at harmonics and frequency regulation and its impact to our grid. So I think these are the two of the many areas that technology can help with grid modernization.
I think for me, I think there's a wide variety of technologies out there that can support grid modernization. Some are still on the research and development phase. Some are already matured and it's out there in the market. Few of these technologies can be energy storage, can be dynamic compensating devices like STATCOM, static bar compensators, and grid forming capabilities, and synchronous condensers. So these, I think, are the technologies that are already matured enough. But a comprehensive study is necessary to identify which of these technologies are really needed in the system, which can provide the most effective solution to the system. So it really depends on the country, but these are I think the most mature technologies that there are right now in the market.
Well, I'm encouraged to see the global focus on sustainability. Our customers more and more are requiring long-term strategic plans from G&W on how we're going to provide sustainable solutions. Within G&W, our own culture is to provide environmentally friendly, recyclable, clean energy technologies. So we are moving from the predominant insulation of SF6 to solid dielectric. You can't meet all the ratings right now with solid dielectric technology, so there are some hybrid, more sustainable and cleaner gases that we will employ. But the key is all renewable energy isn't clean, recyclable, and sustainable. So we have to focus on those technologies that don't harm the environment long term. They don't catch fire. They don't require landfill. They can be 100% recyclable. And because the grid is decentralized, now you need more emphasis on high-speed communication with protocols like IEC 61850 and super fast, full of memory, electronic devices, relays and controls and sensors that can provide all of that information back to the user so they know exactly how to manage the grid.
I think the grid modernization is getting everyone quite excited, and there are questions pouring in from the audience as well. One of which is about what are the emerging technologies of the future that you actually see in emerging new technologies that you see could help in digitalization of the grid in the future? And what would be some of we've talked about smart grid technologies, but what would be the key challenges in implementing these smart grid technologies? Gabriel, can I invite you on the question on the emerging and new technologies that will help accelerate digitalization of the grid?
I think emerging technologies, we're looking at the one of the areas would be, as I mentioned earlier, one of the key switches is we're looking at emerging low carbon alternative. I think carbon capture and utilization or storage technology. So essentially, it's about harnessing carbon and then use it or store it for another form of usage. I think given that the cost of this technology is still relatively high as compared to, you're talking about, I think about 40 to 80 US dollars per ton. And compared to Singapore's carbon tax, right, which is way much lower. So I think the uptake will be kind of limited by that. But I think as the technology starts to mature, the prices definitely will go down. And I think that could be something viable. I think storage technology is rather mature, but I think it's about permanence, that you're keeping the carbon as per what it is after storage, right? So that is the part where it's still not proven. So I think this is one area that I think is where we see as a future technology. And then of course I also mentioned about hydrogen. Again, it's still not a mature technology, but that's where the direction is to be looking at. And then I think in one of the reports that we are looking at geothermal energy, I think that is something that needs to be explored, and of course it's essentially a source of energy. But I think if you start looking at Singapore itself, right, is the very as I mentioned, land is a very we have our very small land mass. So I think even with solar at its peak, right, I think we are only able to meet up to, I think, 4% of our needs, right? So I think the next logical avenue to go is electricity import. So I think Singapore actually is targeting of up to about 4 gigawatts of low carbon electricity imports by 2035 via both HVAC and HVDC. I think, as you mentioned last year in your earlier presentation, that there was recently announced that Singapore started to import power from Laos, hydroelectric power, clean energy, 100 megawatts of those. So I think that 100 megawatts is about 150,000 4-room flats for powering 150K 4-room HDB flats for about a year. So I think going through Laos, Thailand, Malaysia, Singapore through a power integration project. So I think the key thing here is that I think access to low carbon energy beyond shores and diversifying our energy sources is important because that will predominantly, aside from solar, will help us achieve our low carbon goals. And of course, by doing so, I think it opens up the market, right? If Singapore is readily going to start importing renewable energy from the region, right? That actually also supports the regional decarbonization efforts, right? Of course, with that happening, I think the private sectors will start looking at economic opportunities for our neighbors around the region, because if you were to set up a solar farm, I mean, you will be looking at a large land mass where I think our neighboring countries, or even in Australia, right, you're able to put in those huge solar farms and then harness clean renewable energy for export. So I think it's sort of with that kind of drivers, it sort of paves the economy opportunities for private and of course our neighbors, to start investing in this area. So I feel that these are some of the enablers that I feel that or key drivers for even private sector or even our some of the regional partners to take a more active role.
Yeah, absolutely. Hansel, specifically in the battery storage side, can you share a little more about emerging technologies that you think may become real applications in the near future?
Yeah, in the energy storage industry, there are only a few applications right now that we're seeing. First is the frequency regulation. The second is on capacity firming renewable energy. So those are the two main applications that we're seeing in the market right now. But we in Fluence, we have developed more than 40 applications already for different applications, for different grid, for different customers. So we have developed different applications specific to the need of the customer. One trend that we may see in the future, in the very near future, is the virtual transmission line. So we know that renewable energy can be built within 12 months. The transmission line, it would take around 5 years to develop, right? It would take very long to secure permits, right of way. So it would take the grid operator a very long time to develop the transmission line. But energy storage at the same time can be developed within 9 to 12 months. So, the timeline of renewable energy and the timeline of energy storage can be very similar. So by doing that, by installing energy storage, it can support renewable energy. And then in some cases, it can provide virtual transmission line capability. So by installing energy storage at both ends of the transmission line, we can increase the capacity of the transmission line. And then at the same time, it can provide frequency regulation, voltage regulation, and in some cases, it can also provide synthetic inertia. So those applications right now, we're seeing some interest. We're receiving some queries, some requests to provide more information. But I think the key here is there should be a policy, there should be a framework there should be a tariff structure for such service. Because, private sectors has been very active. They have been very active in pushing for this technology. They're just waiting for the right market signal to make it happen.
Yeah, thanks, Sanjay. With battery technology emerging and kind of moving so quickly, and you said you're working on 40 different type of technologies at this time, which would come to the market in the future. The typical lifespan of a battery is typically shorter than what you would see of other power generation projects. So there's a question from the audience on what happens to the batteries at the end of life, and where's the recycling and kind of technology related to that? How's that evolving? Can I invite you to share your thoughts on that?
Yeah. So first on battery recycling, we have an agreement with the battery suppliers. So we can, after their life, after the life of the cells, the manufacturer can collect it and then they can recycle it. At the same time, we Influence have that capability as well. So we can collect the batteries on our own and then recycle it. So it's more sustainable than others think, because we have that mechanisms already in place.
Okay. In particular, in applications of battery technology and how private sector are involved in helping finance that, can you share a little more about how you've seen this evolve in the Philippines?
Yeah. So yeah, a brief background in the Philippines. In the Philippines, the grid operator cannot own and operate energy storage. They simply cannot. It's in the rules. It's in the regulation. So, but the grid operator is mandated to procure ancillary services. So they can procure the service or the energy storage, but they cannot own and operate energy storage. So by doing that, it brought the idea of energy storage as a service kind of a model. So private sector will install the battery. It has to be certified. It has to be tested by the grid operator. And then by doing that, the energy storage, the facility can provide ancillary services for 5 years with a fixed rate. So it's more of an energy storage as a service model in the Philippines, because the grid operator cannot own and operate energy storage such as BESS. And then in some other cases, right now we're seeing is more on the power purchase agreement or power supply agreement. So in that case, the energy storage providing ancillary services to the grid. And in other cases, energy storage is connected to a renewable energy, may it be solar or a wind. So energy storage will firm up the capacity of the solar and the wind. And then by doing that, the hybrid facility will be able to provide long-term power supply agreement to distribution utilities. The duration of which can range from 15 to 25 years. And the rates that we're seeing right now is making sense. It's making financial sense. So for that kind of a model, we're seeing such trend right now. And in fact, we've seen in the news articles that there's a developer who have committed a 850 megawatt mid-merit power supply. So that 850 megawatt mid-merit power supply contains maybe around 3.5 to 5 gigawatts of solar, and then around 4.5 to 5 gigawatt hours of energy storage. So with the completion of that, it will be considered the largest solar farm and largest energy storage in the world.
Thanks, Ansel. So the battery can really kind of sit in different places in the value chain. As you said, it can sit with the transmission service operator or sit outside, owned by a private sector operator, but with the revenue stream and application coming into the transmission service operator, or move to firm capacity with the renewable energy project developer as well. So there's various parts of the value chain where private sector can really bring in these grid modernization technologies and integration and technologies to integrate renewable energy into the modern grid.
Yeah.
Patrick, I think we lost you for a little while there, but
yeah, sorry about that.
No worries. Can you share what you've seen in your part of the world on grid resiliency and how government's kind of putting more into the grid resiliency, and what are the key changes that you're seeing, or the key technologies that you're seeing being built in response to the recent kind of climate events in America?
Yeah, but I'm going to speak globally because the trends are, believe it or not, the same globally. So, everybody is exposed to severe climate change. And so globally, utilities are designing and implementing more power systems that are underground. So you have major utilities starting in the US, like Pacific Gas and Electric, who went through all kinds of financial problems because of all the fires that were experienced, and they were sued. And so they came back in full force and said, hey, look, we're going to take all of our lines and put them underground. And so the challenge that gives to suppliers like us is we have to provide submersible equipment. Fortunately for us, all of our equipment is submersible. It's tested to 20 feet of water for 20 days. And so globally, we have submersible installations of distribution switchgear. And that is proving to be one of the most resilient solutions in the industry. But getting back to renewables are becoming more competitive. I'm not sure if the incentives that we experience in the US are the same globally, but because there is significant incentives for what I'm going to call the commercial and industrial segment of the market, which includes manufacturers like G&W, to deploy microgrids, we're seeing a huge increase in the installation of microgrids in the private sector. So from a resiliency standpoint, you're going to see a lot more underground systems, and you're going to see a lot more microgrids.
Thank you, Patrick. In getting the microgrids into actually implementation, have you seen any kind of key technology challenges or regulatory challenges that hinder private sector from using these applications for microgrid?
Yeah, as I mentioned earlier, one of the biggest regulatory challenges is being able to get the interconnection agreement from the utility to apply your microgrid to their power grid. As I mentioned, in a lot of cases, the utility's power grid can't handle the large influx of microgrid applications. And so unfortunately, you're seeing a lot of microgrid projects fail just because of that situation.
Thanks, Patrick. I think that's where, again, going back to the flexibility in the grid and how we could bring in applications to actually be able to match supply and demand comes back in. Yeah. We have many questions pouring in from the audience. One in particular here, sorry, we won't be able to go through all of them, but one in particular here talks about how does the panelists here see the future potential for peer-to-peer renewable energy trading and virtual power plants in the countries that you operate, where different battery systems could be within electric vehicles, or could be backup storage that buildings have that can be used draw power together and have capacity to actually be able to pull together a virtual power plant. Have you worked on any such technology projects and understand the regulatory challenges and challenges to implement this on a large scale?
Yeah, I'm encouraged by what's happening, at least in the U.S. Our independent system operators, led by PJM, which is one of our biggest and most innovative independent system operators, they provide some pretty lucrative payments for participation in frequency regulation. So that's one of the key ways that you can pay for your microgrid investment from a private sector standpoint. So the increase in peer-to-peer trading between commercial and industrial customers and the grid through independent system operators is very encouraging, and it's going to be an exciting part of our future.
Thank you, Patrick. We have another question from the audience on what are the implications of cyber attack on a smart grid? And if the panelists here have seen or studied this and really thought about how to prevent or minimize this as a grid operator.
Yeah, so in the US, we've had several instances where actual end users, commercial and industrial customers were attacked, not so much on our power grid, but more on an individual private sector basis. And so what's happening is that many of the relay and controls, any kind of intelligent electronic device manufacturer are starting to add more stringent cybersecurity at that device level. And I personally think that's the best way to do it. Now, you can do it, from a communication network standpoint too, but in my humble opinion, the grid is more susceptible to hacking on an individual device basis.
So it's the end use where you really put the cybersecurity in rather than leave it for the grid operator to manage all of it.
Right.
Gabriel, you mentioned about human capital and how human capital and people management is quite crucial in ensuring long-term sustainable asset management of the modernized grid. Can you talk a little more about how you're going about with the capacity building initiatives to have the manpower of the future grid ready?
I think in terms of let's probably looking at capability building in terms of, let's talk about electricity imports. So I think there's always talk, and we're studying import of HVDC connections. So from that area, I mean, traditionally our grid, we do not operate DC assets. So I think with this HVDC connection upcoming, right? So there comes a point where we are actually building capability, understanding how we can operate and maintain this equipment, and then of course this is of course in view of the future that we're gonna get electricity imports coming in as a HVDC. So of course, and that is of course from an energy import perspective, but from a own fuel crew perspective, I think generally if you are talking about asset management and operations, traditionally it is always we have been a very paper-based utility, right? So I think as we start to have more and more information and data available through various sources of digitalization, I think that is where our workers and field crew, generally have are impacted. And I think this is where I think in terms of capability and rescaling has to happen. And this is an important area where with that, right? And I think because the data that you're going to collect out in the field, right? Is only as good as the operator or the field crew accuracy of getting this data. So again, if you're not competent in data collection and knowing how to operate some of the interconnected enterprise system, then I think there lies the bottleneck in trying to modernize the grid operations.
Thanks, Gabriel. There's another question that's coming. I think this is more for Hansel. There's a question on the future of flow battery. As in your role, are you able to share your view on how you see this space evolving?
Yeah, actually, we've been receiving as well some queries about flow batteries, but Influence, what we're seeing right now is really for a more compact type of energy storage, such as lithium-ion, LFP, and NMCs. So right now, that's the trend that we're seeing right now. We've been receiving queries about flow batteries and other types of chemistries as well. But that's the trend that we're seeing right now. The customers want a more compact, more energy dense type of energy storage.
I'd like to speak on that because we're in the process of installing a flow battery on our campus. And I'll tell you the reasons why we chose flow. And also, if you look at the market data, you'll find that in the next 5 to 7 years, flow batteries should outpace the installation of lithium-ion batteries. And the main reason for it is flow batteries last a minimum of 20 years. They're environmentally friendly, meaning they don't catch fire. At the end of life, you don't have to put them in a landfill like you do with lithium ion. So the public is getting a lot more demanding from an environmentally friendly standpoint and a long duration standpoint. The biggest difference between flow and lithium ion is minutes to hours. Flow is hours to days. Okay, so if you're going to have a more resilient grid and you have these major storms, you're going to be out for days, right? So you need a long duration solution. So that's one of the main reasons why we picked vanadium redox flow battery over lithium ion. And I really think that represents the future of energy storage. It's in the flow battery, not lithium ion.
Yeah, and to add to the point of Patrick, it really depends on the application. So for frequency regulation, so for a more short duration type of application, lithium ion, that's what we're seeing right now. It provides a faster response. But as mentioned by Patrick earlier, that for a longer duration battery, it makes financial sense for flow batteries really. As mentioned by Patrick, if you have a typhoon, and then you'll experience a blackout for several hours, several days, flow batteries can really help.
Well, remember I said earlier that one of the biggest return on investments is to participate in frequency regulation.
Yeah.
Well, we're doing that with our flow battery. There is no decrease in performance. And the biggest difference is the more you use lithium ion for frequency regulation, the faster you end its life. So on average, lithium ion batteries last between 5 and 7 years. As I mentioned, a flow battery lasts a minimum of 20 years. So in that time, you have to buy 3 lithium-ion batteries for the price of 1 flow battery.
Yeah, I mean, that really depends on how you use the batteries. Yeah. So for frequency regulation, you really are not using it 0 to maximum every time. So it depends on the grid that you're connected on. I mean, in particular in the Philippines, we're not experiencing more than 1 cycle a day. So it really depends on the application, how the battery will be played.
It also depends on how sustainable and environmentally friendly you want to be too. We can't just isolate certain factors in the evaluation of the technology. We have to look at it based on total life cycle cost and all the factors. And I'm saying when you evaluate it based on all of the factors, flow batteries will win every time.
It's really interesting to have all these evolving technologies as well as proven technologies and how they'll be commercially applied in the future, and how they evolve and adapt to the grid of the future. Maybe just as closing remarks, I'll invite each of the panelists to give your view on how you see the grid of the future in the region, and what do you see as the biggest benefit from the grid of the future to the people that live in the region.
Yep, okay.
Can I invite Gabriel? Yeah, thank you.
Sure. So I think in summary, we are talking about increased complexities due to decarbonization, sustainability, reliability, and resiliency needs. So the role of the future of the grid is about enabling sustainability, right, with low carbon technology, enhanced reliability through risk-based approach, and integrated management of electrical systems. So where we are looking at key enablers such as digitalization, leveraging technology, efficient management, and last but not least, a competent workforce, right? I think for Singapore remains renewable energy challenged due to our limited land space, even with our plans to indigenously produce renewable energy through our rooftops and floating solar installation, we will not be able to sort of replace the country's needs. I think at best, solar is expected to only fulfill about 4% of the country needs by 2030. So in the long-term net zero carbon emission goal, we have to turn to our neighbors, in one area is to provide a clean energy supply through imports and integration with our regional power grids. So as part of energy security, we will need to need diversification and imports from various countries. Also, through the exploration of new technologies such as CCUS, hydrogen, geothermal, and potentially maybe nuclear, for which cost I think still remains high, but technology expected to mature in the near future. And finally, I personally believe that through digitalization and with abundance of data and information, business can and should optimize their operations, reduce wasteful deployments, and this will eventually, lower their carbon footprint. Yep. Thank you for.
Yeah, I think in the future we'll be seeing more and more renewable energy. That's gonna happen, and it will happen. So we just have to put in some measures. We have to prepare for that future. So there has been several technologies that's already matured enough to cater such change, to cater such clean energy transition. We just have to tap on those technologies. We just have to kind of use those technologies to our advantage. Energy storage has been there for a very long time, but we're not seeing such technology in other parts of Southeast Asia. So really, it should start within ourselves. There should be some policy support. There should be some framework. So it should start within the regulation itself for us to be able to tap these technologies to move forward towards a more sustainable future.
Yeah, I agree with you. The future of the power grid is increasingly more two-way power flow, and it poses some challenges for the industry, but I feel really good about our ability to become better partners in the power grid industry. And when I say that, I mean between utilities and end users. You know, more and more we need each other in order to ensure that the grid stays reliable and becomes more resilient. So the utility needs to work closer with commercial and industrial customers to ensure that when we fire up our microgrids, we don't damage the power grid, and we provide a net benefit to the grid instead of a major detriment. And I'm encouraged by this process because we've just gone through it, and we started out in an adversarial relationship with our utility, ComEd, just because of what I told you. You know, the utility is used to supplying power one way and not, you know, taking power the other way. But we were able to sit down with them and draw up a plan so that we both mutually benefit from the advent and energization of our microgrid. And I think more and more that's going to happen. It has to happen in the future.
Thank you everyone for your active participation. I think the audience in the previous Menti poll also kind of talked about how they see the priorities are, and it's very much in line where there needs to be a strategic collaboration between countries to be able to revolutionize the change that we expect in the grid of the future. Going after that, we really need stronger policy frameworks to be able to operationalize these and give the right market signals. Greater investment in R&D, bringing CCUS and other technologies really to the market at a viable price, and then development of smart technologies really to build a smarter grid of the future. Thank you everyone for your enthusiastic participation, as well as the audience for the questions that keep rolling in. Sorry we couldn't answer all of them, but we've tried to answer as many as we could.
Thank you very much to our speakers and moderator for that engaging and insightful session. We have now come to the end of the SIEW Energy Insights webinar series. Do note that a recording of the session will be made available online. We look forward to meeting you at SIEW 2022 this October at Marina Bay Sands, Singapore. Thank you for joining us today and have a great evening ahead.